Hi all, I hope you're doing well and welcome to the Cine Circle Film Self-Distribution Masterclass. First thing is first, it'd be fantastic if you guys could give me a quick thumbs up in the comments if you can see me okay, if you can hear me okay, and just to make sure that everything is working. That would be fantastic. Okay. So just a short introduction about today before we move right into the content. First and foremost, please feel free to use the chat to ask any questions you might have during the presentation. And also feel free to use it to network with each other. It's a great opportunity to meet like-minded filmmakers, make any connections. So feel free to chat it to each other throughout as well. As I previously mentioned in the chat, there will be a recording available for this, which will also be sent via email to you guys right after this. But we, of course, do recommend staying for the live event and continuing to ask questions and network with each other as well. Finally, if you purchased any additional courses or other items when you were getting a ticket for this masterclass, those will be sent to you via email tomorrow. So you will receive those tomorrow. If for any reason you do not receive that email, simply reply to any of our emails and let us know, and we'll get those to you as soon as we can. Finally, at the end of this masterclass, we're also going to be presenting you guys with some additional bonuses and things the way we can help you further. So stick around for that. So just to make sure that we're all here in the right place, this is a film self-distribution masterclass. So today we're going to be talking a little bit about conducting audience research and building an audience for your film, for your release. We're going to talk a little bit about preparing your assets for distribution, mainly one key asset that you need and why it's so important. And then we're going to discuss how to become your own distributor, how you can actually release the film online without a traditional distributor. And then finally, something that is still a huge question mark amongst most filmmakers trying to self-distribute, we're going to talk a little bit about marketing your film as well. Before we get into the how and all of those, all of those strategies and tips, I do want to talk a little bit about today's film distribution landscape, because I think it's important to talk about that to set the scene as to why self-distribution exists and why so many filmmakers are starting to self-distribute their films. So how do most distributors work from a business perspective if you go down the traditional distribution route today? First and foremost, it's important to know that the business model for most small indie distributors is that their ultimate aim is to get bought by a bigger distributor. That is their exit strategy. That is what they're ultimately trying to achieve, which means that their main strategy is to get simply as many films as possible onto their catalog. The more films they have onto their catalog, the more likely a bigger distributor is to buy them. Now, this means that they're going to be acquiring as many films as they can, regardless of how much money those films will actually be making, because it's just the more titles, the better. That with smaller indie film distributors, that seems to be the strategy these days. And the contracts reflect this. So the contract means that they're going to be trying to lock you in for perpetuity or for as long of a term as they possibly can. They are going to add into the contract that they can actually, a lot of distributors now add into contracts that they can actually give your project and sell it to another distributor. So that's within most contracts as well, and you don't have a choice over this within the term. So there's many different things that they do in order to be able to get to that ultimate goal. So it's important to know that. The other thing is that their goal is to make as much revenue for their company rather than for your film, which is another thing that's important to note. So they will charge you anywhere from 20 if you're really, really lucky and get a great distribution deal, to up to 50% of the revenue that your film makes. But that doesn't necessarily mean that you will actually get the 50%. they have lots of creative ways to charge you fees. So, this might be uncapped marketing costs, which essentially means that they can say they spent whatever they want on marketing, and and just tell you that all of the revenue has gone into recouping their costs. They can charge you admin fees. They can charge you interest on their initial marketing investment. So there's a lot of different ways that they charge you different fees, which essentially means that even if your film is successful, you will hear horror stories of filmmakers where they haven't seen a penny or a dollar of a film that has made hundreds of thousands of dollars in a release. And this is why self-distribution really has, come around out of the frustration with traditional distribution deals. Indie filmmakers have realized, okay, well, this doesn't work. Let's try and figure out a new method. And the final kind of thing that, that's really pushed self-distribution into becoming a real thing is that most distributors now focus on online-only releases, meaning that if you get a traditional distribution deal, even if it's one of the bigger distributors, unless you have a big budget and big name actors, the film will go straight to an online release. And what a lot of filmmakers have realized is that this is something that you can do yourself. You can self-distribute a film online yourself, and that's what we're going to be talking about today. It would be also great if you guys could let me know in the comments if any of you have had bad traditional distribution deals, or if you have any experience with self-distributing your film. It would be fantastic if you guys could let us know about your experience in the chat. So first and foremost, and we've got, I'm going to try and sort of talk what I normally do a 3-day course on, and try and condense it as much as possible into the next 45 minutes or so. So I'm going to be focusing on the most important elements that I think you need to know if you're going to go down that traditional distribution route. Starting off with market research, because most filmmakers who already have a film are already going to be struggling because perhaps they haven't made the right film. So the most important thing, first and foremost, is to do market research. And the first question that I want to answer is, what will determine the success of your film? Because most filmmakers are, really adamant that it's going to be the quality of the film, the technical quality of the film, that it's going to be shot in 4K and with anamorphic lenses, and it's going to have, it's got to look incredible. But that is not actually the case when it comes to films that make significant revenue. The first thing is there an actual audience for your film? And is there an audience that is going to be not is there an audience for your genre, not is there an audience for your type of film, is there an audience for your specific film? So, we know that, for example, horror films tend to do better than dramas. And that is because there is a much bigger audience that are interested in low-budget horror films that can be shot for $5,000, and there will be an audience who will love those films. Whereas there's very few people who will watch a film that's a low-budget drama without known actors. So there isn't such a big demand for it. And on top of that, there's so many dramas out there that the market is oversaturated. So you need to ask yourself, is there really an audience for my film? Next, do your marketing assets actually resonate with that audience? The poster, the trailer, all of the marketing efforts that you sort of do, is that something that's really going to resonate with that audience? Do you understand your audience? Thirdly, can you reach that audience? So you know who they are, you know they may be interested in your film, but can you reach them in a cost-effective way? These are the 3 really most important things. And then the final thing is, if you get all of these right, and only if you get all of these right, will it matter how good your film will actually be? Because yes, your film might get into Sundance and might get noticed and might get, in a ton of press, and then all of this will happen by itself. But the more likely option is that you will be, having an online release, you'll be putting it on Amazon or Tubi or one of the streamers, and you will have to reach that audience. And the only way you will be able to do that is if you have a film that has an audience, the marketing assets resonate with that audience, and if you can reach that audience. So it's really only the fourth, thing of how good the film will be. That's not to say that you don't need a good film, but it just means there are other things that are also just as, if not more, important. And the first thing that you really want to ask yourself, especially for everyone here who hasn't made a film yet, is your film truly needed in the market? The same way that if you're creating a new business or a new product, you can't just repeat what someone else has done. You can't just create something because you think it's cool. You really need to understand, is there a need for this film in the market? And ideally, you want to find this out before you start writing your script. So the question is how? And the answer is really by speaking to filmmakers, speaking to festival programmers, speaking to distributors. Now, this is something that I do on a daily basis. So every single day I am speaking to different distributors. I interview them on our events, on our podcasts, and therefore I'm starting to see the trends of what's needed, what's working right now. But you can do the same. You can, keep up with all the current podcasts that are happening within the filmmaking industry. You can be in the different filmmaking distribution groups to see what's working well, what's not. But this is really, really critical, because if you know this, then you'll know, okay, we all know the basics, such as horror films tend to do better than dramas. Okay, but if you dive deeper into it, then you will, for example, also know that in the last year specifically, films, even very, very low budget films, even terrible films that have had a female Black cast in the film have done incredibly well on Tubi over the last year. If you had a film that was predominantly a female Black cast, it would have killed it in the last year, because films that were made for $5,000 have been making hundreds, like six figures on Tubi. They've been absolutely killing it. Why? Because there was a demand for it. There was an audience that was on Tubi that was really craving those types of films. And guess what? None of the big studios, none of the big production companies have been making these types of films. Therefore, there was a huge demand in the market. And right now, that demand is still not filled. There's still all these films, again, with female-oriented Black cast films that are just doing so incredibly well, right? Because the market isn't oversaturated just yet. So you have to keep up with these trends. And if you're able to do that, you will find that you will create a film that's naturally going to be set up for success. On the other hand, if you create a drama without well-known actors, you're always going to be on the back foot. So with that, you need to understand what type of films are currently doing well in the market and what there is a need for right now in the market. And again, that's just by talking to people, by researching films that are currently doing well. So how do you build an audience for your film? Now, the basics are absolutely crucial. You have to build an audience by having, good organic social posts. And, the key thing over here is you need enough content and you need to learn the algorithms. For example, if you're launching something on TikTok, you need to know the different algorithms that are in play on TikTok in order to be able to reach a wider audience. Strategic Facebook group outreach is also a great way to build an audience. You have to know how to build an email list. You have to find key supporters and promotional partners. And you have to know how to do PR, and you have to know how to do reviews. And I'm going to touch upon these things a little bit here today. But first and foremost, what I want to say is that I could give you a million tips and tricks and digital marketing hacks. And to be honest, that's something that I'm quite passionate about because I come from a digital marketing background. I was a filmmaker, but I also spent 10 years working in digital marketing for various different companies that weren't necessarily film related. And with that, I learned paid advertising and Google ads and meta ads and everything else. So I love the little, digital marketing strategies and so on. But today, rather than giving you the tiniest little tips and tricks that you might or might not benefit you, I want to give you the most important piece of advice that I can. And this is something that every single filmmaker that has leveraged this one piece of advice has done extremely well. And for some reason, filmmakers aren't necessarily utilizing this one thing that I'm going to talk about over here. And I'm going to give you guys some specific examples of it as well. And the best thing is, it doesn't need to cost you a penny in advertising or promotion. It doesn't even need to be incredibly time consuming. And that is that creativity is your absolute biggest asset as a filmmaker. But when it comes to business and marketing, the creativity seems to disappear. All filmmakers seem to suddenly become really, really not creative. And I actually have interviewed so many different filmmakers, and so few of them have given me truly original stories of truly original marketing campaigns that have done for their films that have created real word of mouth marketing. So I want to give you guys a couple of examples of this, because I want to inspire you and give you, something, some food for thought over here and a starting point to get your creative juices flowing so that you can create your own creative marketing campaigns that will get a large audience to talk about your film. Because word of mouth marketing at the end of the day is going to be what's going to push your film out there. And before I get into some of these examples, I also just want to explain a little bit more why word of mouth is so so important. Because when you're doing traditional digital marketing for a product, right? For example, I run a lot of events. I run, paid ads for people who buy tickets to some of our events, or who might sign up for our courses and so on. Now that works because there's a product that I'm trying to sell, and there's a very easy way to reach people and to sell that product to them using paid advertising, right? And it works well, and I can get a positive return on my ad spend. The problem with film is that with streamers like Tubi, you might get a few cents for every single time someone watches your film, right? If you run paid ads to that platform, you're going to be paying probably 50 cents to $1 or something around that to get someone to go onto Tubi. By then, you've already lost money. You've already lost 90% of your ad spend, because even if they stick around and watch your entire film, you're still only going to be able to make about 10 cents out of that, which is why it's so incredibly difficult to get traditional digital marketing to work for film. And this is why having creative marketing, and this is why having creative marketing campaigns that will create this echo chamber effect of people talking about your film is so important. And this is why even the biggest production companies and distributors, who are doing, the massive blockbusters, are still using that creative stunt marketing campaigns rather than traditional ads. So let me give you guys a couple of examples of those. And again, this is for inspiration. This is to just get you thinking about your specific films as well. So the first one is a film that I'm currently an executive producer on called Shaken and Stared. Now, they created a documentary film. It's the first feature-length documentary film about flair bartenders. And the filmmakers in that project are incredibly creative with their marketing, and I can see that that's what they're thinking about half of the time, is how can we get really creative with marketing. They talk to me about the fact that they're leveraging AI and so on in order to create a mass number of social posts and content and things like that. But one thing that they've realized is they're currently actually selling or pre-selling the film, and they're going to be releasing it first and foremost on Vimeo. And so what they knew is that if they just put up social posts, it's not going to just sell. So what they needed to do was they needed to find their audience. And the way that they've tapped into that is they essentially have sent out QR codes or little postcards with QR codes to a range of bartenders who are in the documentary or who are really interested in the documentary. And each of those QR codes is actually an affiliate link so that the bartenders can actually get an affiliate, percentage of the sales that they make from the film. So now they have an army of people who are flair bartenders who are promoting the film for them across the globe, right? Which is incredible, right? Because this way they have the people in the documentary who are actively promoting the film to people who are interested about flair bartenders in the moment where they are really interested about flair bartendering, because they've just watched a flair bartender do the performance, right? So it's an incredible marketing strategy that they're utilizing over here. So have a think about what can you do so that you are not the only one promoting your film, but that there is other people promoting the film for you. And ideally many, many people in a way that can, create some real awareness. Great. So I want to move on to a horror film that was actually created during the pandemic, during the COVID pandemic. The film is called Host. And the first story is how they got the film funded, which is basically a group of friends that were that would get together during COVID when everyone was in lockdown, and every single day they would watch a film, and the next day they would all go on a Zoom call and they would discuss the film. And a couple of the friends decided, hey, you know what? Let's pull a prank on everyone. And the next time we do the Zoom call, let's basically pretend that I heard a noise upstairs. I'm going to go upstairs with the laptop and we'll choreograph this whole thing where they think that someone's killed me, and they will scare the shit out of everyone on that Zoom call. And they recorded it as well. So they, choreographed it, they figured it out. And when they did it, everyone on the call initially believed that it was really happening and they were freaking out. They put that video onto YouTube. It got 15 million views in something like 48 hours. And literally within a few weeks, they got a couple £100,000 from a production company, in order to make the full feature film of that. So it was a film that was it seemed like everything was shot over Zoom, which kind of shows you, like, when you're looking to get funding, stop just thinking about, okay, well, where can I find an executive producer? What bar do they hang out with? Where can I film them? Create something that's going to go viral. Create something that's going to grab people's attention like this, right? Something that just they put it online, it goes viral, and then they had people coming to them rather than them coming to other people to ask for funding. But their creative marketing strategy didn't end there. Once the film was finished and Host was, doing the film festival circuit, they decided they were going to film festivals and they wanted people to remember them afterwards. That is one of the big positive outcomes that can come out of film festivals, which is that your film, people will talk about it, people will review it, people will write articles about it, and therefore you will get a lot of awareness. But what they wanted to do is they wanted to give those journalists, those people who came, a story to tell afterwards. So what they decided to do was, after their screening at one of the film festivals, all the directors from the films of that slot were invited to come up on stage for a Q&A. They all came in and they normally sat down on their chairs to join the panel discussion. Now, the director of Host came up on stage with a bag of salt and he poured it onto the stage, creating a circle around his chair, and he sat down on it. Now, in the story, in the film, creating a circle of salt was part of the plot where that would keep the demons and spirits away and would keep the person safe. So right after people watched that film, they saw him create this circle of salt and just calmly sit down on the stage on the chair. And everyone started talking about that. It was like, oh my God, were you there for that screening where that guy created that ring of salt around his chair? And here I am, probably like 5 years later, and I had nothing to do with that film. I just interviewed the writer at one of my events who told me the story. But here I am 5 years later telling you guys about this film. So when you create something that generates a story that people want to tell, that will give you free marketing for years and years and years to come. But on top of that, it gives journalists a story to write about, so they can write about the film festival and that crazy experience that they had. So have a think about what is the little stunt marketing campaign, the guerrilla marketing strategy that you can use that will give people a story to tell someone else and that will be linked to your film. That's the strategy here. The final one that I want to give you guys is actually also a marketing campaign for the funding of a film. But again, very, very similar strategies to distribution. So there is a producer in the UK called Laurie Brewster who has been doing Kickstarter campaigns every single year for his films for the last, I think, 10 years. And they're always really, really successful. And every single time he comes up with a new interesting way to get people to talk about his campaign. So he was doing a horror film and he wanted to do it in this 80s style of like the old horror films that, he knows there was an audience that loved those and that, people don't make horror films like that anymore. So what he decided to do was to resurrect this Amicus production, which is this horror, production house that existed in London, 20 or 30 years ago, that a lot of people knew about. He resurrected this production company and said he was going to create this new horror film under that label. And what happened was incredible. First of all, they got nearly £200,000 funded on Kickstarter. And part of the reason why they were able to have such a successful campaign was because they gave journalists a story to write about. Now, saying a horror filmmaker is creating a horror film and crowdfunding is not necessarily newsworthy. On the other hand, this little stunt marketing campaign of let's resurrect this old production company that everyone, who were filmmakers back then knew about and that it was quite famous, that got Variety to write about them, right? Along with so many other publications. So when you think about doing your PR and your press, I always get asked, what is the perfect format for your press release? What email should I send to journalists? How do I find that list of 1,000 different journalists? And obviously all of that is important. But the main mistake that filmmakers make when they're reaching out to hundreds of journalists and not hearing back from any of them is that they're not giving the journalist a story. You need to remember that news editors are there to write stories. They write and about stories that are happening in the world. And you making a film is not a story. So you have to create something original, something that's going to give them that story that people will be interested in. And this is a perfect example of that. So the strategy with your marketing is always get people talking, because that word of mouth marketing is your best friend when it comes to self-distribution. Now, more onto that self-distribution side. First, before you start releasing your film anywhere, I want you to understand the most important marketing asset that you will need, which is the poster. This is arguably more important than the film itself when it comes to self-distribution. If your poster does not resonate with your audience and is not incredible, doesn't matter how good your film it is, no one is going to see it. On the other hand, there are hundreds of films that are absolutely terrible that are making very, very solid revenue because they have a great poster. So this is how non-filmmakers pick films. They go onto a platform such as Tubi, and if you guys have ever watched a film on Tubi, you will realize that to pick a film, you first see a bunch of posters. That's it, just the posters. You click on that poster and you see a one-line, synopsis of the film. That's it, and a bigger version of the poster. So really, aside from that one-line synopsis, which honestly, is never going to be incredible and get someone to want to watch your film, which means when someone is on Tubi, unless they're really doing their research and going onto YouTube and checking out trailers, which most people don't, your film, people will decide whether they watch the film based on the poster. And I know everyone says don't judge a book by their cover, but you judge books by their cover, and publishers know that people buy books based on covers, right? And it's the same with filmmaking. Your film will be, making revenue or not making revenue based on how good the poster is. That's going to be the initial thing. That's going to be all that's really going to initially matter for the success of that film. So you need to figure out how to create that perfect poster. And just to drive that point home a little bit more, I want to show you guys a poster of a film that I watched on Tubi, partially watched on Tubi. I'm so sorry if someone on this masterclass has actually created this film. But anyways, the film is called Mountain Shark, and I saw the poster, and do you know what? The title intrigued me, Mountain Shark. The poster intrigued me. I'm like, how is there going to be a shark in the mountains? It seemed like a low budget, but probably a cool film with some cool VFX. It's going to be an indie film, a low budget film, but it might be really cool. I'm just so intrigued by this poster and by the title and what the hell this film could be. So I started watching it. The acting was not great, the editing was not great, but it was a low budget indie film. And then the shark appeared. And the shark was like this cartoon thing that they've added onto just regular footage of the ground, and it was just a fin going. Looked like it was meant to look like the shark was underground, but it just looked like it was pasted on top of it, and it was like one of the worst CGIs I've ever seen in my entire life. But that was 30 to 40 minutes into the film. And by then, I've already been fed 4 ads, and I already made that filmmaker about 10 to 14 cents. And that filmmaker probably has made so much freaking money from that film and from so many other people. Now, that is to say they actually did go with a traditional distributor. I believe it was ITN who probably created this poster. And this is what distributors are so good at, taking films that are really low budget and not that good, not giving them a minimum guarantee, but knowing that they can make some revenue out of it just by creating a good poster. But you can do that too, right? You can have a good film, but you also need to have an incredible poster that goes with it. So do your research, figure out, go on Tubi, find films that are similar to yours, look at their posters. And if you're not a graphic designer, hire a professional who can make a film poster and who does that for a living. That's going to be the best couple $100 that you will spend. And then finally, once you've researched it, also consider testing the poster. So you can do this in many different ways. You can test different posters using meta ads. You can test them on YouTube. For example, if you post a video on YouTube, you can ask YouTube to A/B test free cover images, which can be the 3 different cover arts that you want for your poster. So there are many different ways that you can test it to see which one the audience will actually resonate with the most. Really, really important. Now, let's move on to the actual self-distribution method. So with the self-distribution method, as you spoke about, you have to create your own audience, because you're not going to have the audience of a distributor or a big production company and so on. You then have to become your own distributor, and you can do that in 2 different ways. Firstly, you can distribute your film without aggregators. You can put your film on YouTube, on Vimeo. You can put it on Prime Video Direct, or essentially Amazon TVOD, not SVOD anymore. You can do all of that yourself. Or you can also go down another route where you use aggregators and distribution platforms to get your film on a variety of other platforms, such as Tubi, for example, because Tubi does not deal with individual filmmakers, which means you have to go through a distribution platform or an aggregator or a traditional distributor in order to get onto the platform. And then finally, once the film is on the platforms, you then want to promote and market your film. My personal strategy with this, and this is again based on my experience as well as interviewing literally over 100 distributors and filmmakers, is you should just try and get your film on as many platforms as you possibly can, and then tailor your marketing for specific platforms. So first and foremost, aggregators. Aggregators are companies such as Bitmax, such as Quiver. I believe Quiver is now called something else. I think they were recently bought by someone in the last year. These are companies that will charge a one-off fee to put your film, usually about $2,000 or just over $2,000, to put your film on a variety of different platforms. Most often, they will put your film on TVOD platforms. So these are platforms where you'll be selling your film rather than showing your film for free and getting paid through ad revenue. So these are platforms such as iTunes, such as Google Play, Amazon TVOD, these types of platforms, right? They're great, but they don't tend to be a huge revenue earner because it is so incredibly difficult these days to get someone to buy a film, let alone buy an indie film with a cast and crew that they have never heard of. But that is one of your options. Now, some aggregators also do deal with Tubi, but from everything that I've heard, it is a lot harder to get on AVOD platforms such as Tubi using an aggregator. But again, you can look at Quiver, you can look at Bitmax, these types of aggregators, if you want to just pay a one-off fee, and then all of the revenue after that will go to you. My personal preference, and by the way, I'm not affiliated with any of these companies in any way. I will not be sending you any affiliate links. I am not paid by any of these companies, so I'm just giving them here for educational purposes. The other one is FilmHub, which is a distribution platform. So they work a little bit differently. They actually call themselves a distributor, which they aren't really technically a distributor. But essentially what they do is you will put your film onto FilmHub, and they will then pitch it to a variety of different streaming platforms, and they will take a 20% fee. So they will take a 20% cut of any revenue that comes from that film. So, they work with over 100 different platforms. So again, these are, everything from ones like Amazon and Tubi to, much more prestigious platforms as well, and SVOD platforms, and so on. So the process over here. First, the filmmaker uploads the film onto FilmHub. FilmHub will select appropriate films and submit them to individual streaming platforms for approval. The platforms will select films that they like, and then the platforms pay FilmHub. FilmHub takes a 20% cut and pays the filmmaker. In comparison to working with aggregators, FilmHub is quite good at showing you more analytics. So, for example, it's going to be, with Tubi, you actually get like a great analytics dashboard now where you see on a daily basis what's happening on Tubi, how many people are viewing your film. This is all this data that you don't necessarily get with aggregators. Now, the key with FilmHub is what films are accepted. Well, first of all films that pass their quality control are accepted, but that doesn't mean that they will be accepted to any of the streaming platforms. So there are films that get onto FilmHub that don't earn any revenue whatsoever because they don't get onto any streaming platforms. In order to get onto those streaming platforms, you have to do your research. and you have to do, yeah, you have to follow a lot of different steps in order to increase your chances to getting onto as many platforms as possible. When I normally teach, a full class on this, I'll spend about an hour just talking about how to upload your film onto FilmHub, because there are so many little elements over here that you can miss. We don't have time for that in this class over here, but you can also do a lot of your own research. FilmHub actually has a lot of documentation on exactly how to upload your film onto FilmHub. From a technical point of view, it's actually not that difficult. But you also need to be creative. You will be adding a sales pitch, which will be used to pitch to streaming platforms and so on. So you have to just upload it in a way where you sell your film and you portray it in the best light possible. And then the most important thing is, once your film makes it on any of the streaming platforms on FilmHub, even if it's some small platform that you never heard of, you need to promote, because the number one thing that determines whether FilmHub will pitch your film to other streaming platforms is how well and how much revenue is your film making on the current platforms. So if your film gets onto a small streaming platform and makes no revenue, they're not going to pitch it elsewhere. On the other hand, if you get onto a small platform and you promote it and you market it and it gets a significant amount of revenue, it will then start using that data and pitching it to all the other platforms, saying, look how well it's doing on this platform. Why don't you put it up on yours, and you can also have a chunk of that revenue. And that sort of leads me nicely, well, in a moment, into marketing as well. But before we get into that, I mentioned that there are also other ways where you can get your film onto platforms where you don't necessarily need an aggregator. YouTube is one of them. And the reason why I want to mention YouTube specifically here today is because YouTube is actually the world's biggest AVOD platform, advertising video on demand platform. It's available in over 100 countries, whereas Tubi is still available in under 10 countries, right? So it's got a much wider audience. The only platform that is actually available in more countries is Amazon, but only for TVOD, which means you can only sell your film in other platforms. You can't show it for free and get a chunk of the revenue share, of the ad revenue. And again, for example, for Amazon, sorry, this was from an old slide over here. It's not only extremely selective for SVOD, it's actually completely closed their, Amazon has completely closed their doors to SVOD very recently. So anyways, YouTube is a great way to reach people in countries who will otherwise never be able to watch your film on any other platforms. So there is, the first and really lengthy and for most people impossible way to make money on YouTube is to monetize your own channel. With that, you need at least 1,000 subscribers. You need to have over 4,000 watch hours in a 12-month period, which is actually really difficult. And you need to have a constant stream of content in order to keep subscribers engaged. So this can be a great source of revenue if you are passionate about being a YouTuber. And if you're already a YouTuber, and if you're already, putting out a ton of content, such as, Jason Horton is an example of this. He'll put his film on his YouTube channel because he already has a ton of subscribers and he, posts regularly. But for everyone else who, we don't have a huge amount of subscribers or viewers, there is a faster and easier way. And that is to license your film to specific YouTube channels that deal with just showing low budget or indie feature films. So most distributors, for example, will have their own channel, but they will only license films where they are the distributor. So Indie Rights is a indie film distributor, who are, by the way, also really great if you are planning to go down the more traditional distribution route, although they're kind of somewhere between self-distribution and traditional distribution. But they will have their own YouTube channel, but they will not take a film and put it on their YouTube channel unless they are representing that film, unless they're distributing that film. But there are a lot of channels who do. There are channels with millions and millions of subscribers where you can just apply and submit your film on there, and they will license it and put it onto YouTube. And they will normally split it so that they get 30% of the ad revenue and you will get 70% of the ad revenue from YouTube. To give you an idea, these channels make anywhere from, or your videos and films on those channels get anywhere from 10,000 views to 1 million views. For something like about 1 million views, you will get about $6,000 in revenue share that will go to you. That's your 70% cut, which means that if your film does well and you can put it on 10 different YouTube channels, that's $60,000, which can be a very, very nice chunk of money for an indie film. So YouTube is slowly becoming, or actually fast becoming, a very, very good earner for a lot of indie filmmakers. And it wasn't like that 3 years ago. And this is the thing about self-distribution, is that it changes so much. You know, Amazon was huge 4 years ago for filmmakers. Now it's horrible. Tubi was incredible, you know, a year and a half ago. We're now starting to see a slow decline. Now YouTube is coming up as, you know, a really, really great AVOD platform. So you always need to keep up with what's happening in this space. And again, they will then pay you that 70% revenue share. And all channels have a very different way of accepting films over here, but most of them will have a website and they will have a simple submission form, and you will be able to take it from there. Now, the final piece of the puzzle is your film is out there. But now, how do you actually market it? And here we're talking more about promotional strategies. So the overall strategy, as I mentioned, is to get your film on multiple platforms, really as many platforms as you can. And then what you're really trying to do is trigger algorithms to push the film for you. Trigger the algorithms on the platform to push the film to as many people as possible. And the way to do that is through traffic, through sales, and through a high completion rate. So when there's a platform such as Tubi will reward filmmakers who are getting more users onto Tubi. So if you are, you know, doing a lot of marketing efforts and getting a lot of users onto the platform, Tubi will start to show your film to more people, because they will see you're bringing people onto the platform. They want to give you something so that you keep doing that, and the algorithms will start to show the film to more people. Then there's sales on you know, platforms such as Amazon. Again, if you're getting them sales, they will start pushing that film to more people. But again, this is sort of the first step. The second one is, if a ton of people, you're driving traffic onto Tubi, and a ton of people are you know, coming onto your film, watching the first 2 minutes and then dropping off, that is a strong indication to the streaming platforms that your film is just not good, and that will actually drive users long-term away from the platform. So they will stop using your film, or even take your film off of the platform. And this is where the film has to be engaging, especially in the first 5 to 10 minutes. So if you're making an indie film and you're doing an online release, and the first 5 minutes is an opening credit sequence, you're going to get a lot of users dropping off. In the same way, if you're making an action film and in the first couple of minutes there aren't guns and action sequences, people are going to drop off. So you need to make sure you hook people in that first 5 minutes. So the other thing that's really important over here is to send not just any traffic to those pages, but warm and targeted traffic to the streaming platforms. So you don't want to just say, hey, anyone and everyone come onto my Tubi page. Because if you do that and you send a bunch of people who don't really want to watch your film onto your page, they will come onto that page and they will bounce right off, or they will again watch 30 seconds of the film, and that will actually be detrimental to your film. So you need to make sure the traffic that you're sending is warm and is targeted, and is people who might genuinely be really interested in watching your film. So how do we do that? And again, this is something that normally, you know, you can teach for days or hours. But in terms of the marketing sources, the first and foremost is your core supporters. These are people that you know. If your film is out on Tubi, I mean, you should have every single one of your friends, every single one of the crew, the cast, your colleagues, they should all watch the film. They should all review the film on IMDb, and so on, because that is your first core initial audience. So it's almost a little bit like crowdfunding, except for if it's AVOD, you're not asking anyone to pay, you're just asking them to watch your film. That is the first step. On day one, you need to have a list of 50 or 100 people who you know well, who you can say, guys, the film is up there, can you watch it, can you give it a review? The next is professional reviews. These are, tend to actually do really, really well, especially with horror, sci-fi, those genre type films. If you get professional reviews from reviewers, that tends to give you a pretty good boost in traffic, and very targeted traffic, because it's someone who read a review, an honest review of the film, and then went to watch it. Now, what you'll find is that a lot of people will be charging for these reviews. This doesn't mean that you're paying for a good review. This is not an unethical thing. This just means that a lot of the reviewers are getting hundreds of requests for reviews every single day, and they can't do all of those. So what you'll probably end up doing is spending about $50 to $75 or maybe $100 for most reviewers for an expedited or a guaranteed review. You're paying so that you get a guarantee that they will review your film in the first 7 days, and on their blog, on their YouTube channel, on their TikTok, wherever they review films, they will post that review, which will generate awareness and traffic. Again, you're not paying for a good review. You might pay $100 and get a terrible review, but that's why it's still a genuine thing. It's not you're not paying someone for to give you a good review. You're just paying for an expedited review. Next, an email list. Now, there is the digital marketing strategy of having landing pages, driving traffic. They're getting people to give you their email addresses. That's all really important. But the absolute basic is your Gmail, your Hotmail, whatever you use for emails. What you'll find is you'll have thousands of contacts there. Before you release your film, organize those contacts into categories. Figure out who you want to reach out to. Schedule those emails so that when your film is released, you can email everyone that you know, or people that you've worked with, or even people who have emailed you and who are these acquaintances where you don't quite know who they are, but you've got their email address. If they're in your email, you can kind of figure out what conversations you've had in the past. But we all have thousands of emails, people where we've been in touch with them. If it's appropriate, email as many of them as possible about your release. PR and articles. So again, this is an important one. This is something that you can start already while you're in pre-production of the film. Like the things, publications such as Screen Daily and so on, they will write stories. And actually, there's way more stories during the production of your film than there are once the film is released. Once the film is released and it's done with the film festival circuit, the rest of the stories, you basically need to create something yourself. But before that, the stories are, this actor has just signed on our film. We've just begun shooting. This is an interesting shoot that we're doing. My film just got into the first film festival. And if it's a known film festival, or if you have a sort of semi-known actor, there will be a lot of publications who will be interested in writing those stories. So this is the most important thing to think about with PR. What is the story that you are actually wanting the journalists to write about? Because they will not promote your film for you. They will cover a story. Podcasts. There are so many podcasts. If you're self-distributing a film, so many podcasts of filmmakers who are looking for filmmakers who have self-distributed their films to talk about their experience. And this is you for 45 minutes or an hour getting, questions about your film and about the distribution of your film in front of an audience of filmmakers who might be interested in watching it. The great thing about podcasts is that they have the longest tail in terms of the marketing, which means you will release the podcast, and for years afterwards, people will be watching that podcast. On the other hand, if you release a TikTok video, within 3 days or maximum 3 weeks, it's dead. No one will ever see that video again. And this is why podcasts are really good, because it's a long-term investment. Organic social. The key over here is, while you're making the film, you need to have enough content for your organic social accounts. So you need to make sure you have as much behind the scenes content, really interesting videos from set, all of that, so that when you start posting, you're not just posting your trailer every single day, but you've got new content that you are releasing on Instagram, on Facebook, on TikTok, and so on. That's all promoting your film, but it's all fresh. It's all new. That's the key here. Facebook groups, are still incredible for promoting films online. You can find a Facebook group for pretty much everything, right? So if you're making a drama that's specifically about some sort of, mental health, or, some sort of, or if you're making a documentary about a very specific topic, pretty much any topic, even however small it might be, there's going to be hundreds of Facebook groups where people are passionate and interested about that topic. So Facebook groups are one of the easiest ways to reach communities. Now, before you just go over there and drop your link, you need to engage with people. You need to become part of that community, and then you can promote your film. So if you guys have ever self-distributed a film and you said, I posted in 1,000 Facebook groups and nothing came of that, it's probably because you've just posted the link, and that way Facebook's algorithms will never show that link to anyone. On the other hand, if you start engaging with people and people engage back with you in those Facebook groups, if you then post your link and tell people about the film, those people that you engaged with, Facebook's algorithm will show those links to them. They will then engage with them, and then Facebook's algorithm will determine where to show it to more people. So that's what's crucial. Find the right Facebook groups, engage with people in those communities beforehand, and only then start to promote your film. And then finally, paid ads. Now, paid ads is, again, as I mentioned before, something that's extremely, extremely difficult to get right. My strategy is, if anyone has ever run meta ads, this will make sense. If you have never run meta ads, it might not make sense. But my strategy is this. I run an ad for video views to get people to watch the trailer of a film. You gather those video views. Then you create an audience based on people who have watched at least 15 seconds of the trailer. These are people who watch at least 15 seconds, which means something hooked them in, something drew them in. You take that audience and then you run an ad where the objective of the ad is to get people to click on your link and go to your Tubi page or your streaming platform page. That two-step approach means that the people that you're targeting will be people who are genuinely interested in watching your film. Because the last thing you want is for Facebook to just target anyone and everyone who will click on your link, because they will click on your link, go into Tubi, bounce right off of the page, or watch 20 seconds of your film, and that will actually be detrimental to the success of your film. So this is why you need to have the warm, targeted traffic within your ads. And you can do that by creating an audience from people who have watched at least 15 seconds of your trailer. Okay, guys. I hope that this was helpful. My last piece of advice over here is to just keep making movies, because it's going to be so difficult for you to create one film that's just going to be successful. The key is to keep making movies, because those movies will keep earning revenue over time. But the best thing to do is to have a slate of projects, because you never know which one will end up being successful. So once again, I hope that this was useful. I see that there are some questions over here in the chat already, so I'm going to get to them in a moment. Please feel free to use this as an opportunity to ask any other questions you might have. Before I get into the questions, I also, first and foremost, wanted to thank you all for attending today. And if you found this class valuable, and if you want to dive a lot deeper into these specific strategies, really how marketing works, how to upload films onto Film Hub and distribution platforms, how to in detail build an audience, then I'd love to share with you our next event, which is actually taking place next week. And this is the Independent Film Self-Distribution Mastery. So it's a 3-day live online training program, similar to this, but just 9 times as long and in depth. And it's going to include really the full roadmap to the online self-distribution. It will have all the in-depth detailed strategies that I've gathered from my own experience, as well as from over 100 producers and distributors that I've interviewed at CineCircle over the last 7 years. And it's going to include a lot of real world examples and case studies, which I always find really, really valuable. And then there's also going to be plenty of time during that live training for Q&As to answer any questions that you might have. And we currently have a 43% discount on tickets, but those specific discounted tickets are nearly sold out. So if you are interested in those, you can feel free to either scan this QR code. You can see the link also below the video that you're currently watching, or below the live stream. And I'm also just going to add it here into the chat. See, one of you guys already got a ticket, which is fantastic. It's also just like this, great for networking with like-minded filmmakers. So if you guys have any questions about this, feel free to add it into the chat as well. But in the meantime, I'm going to answer some of the questions in the chat, and please feel free to add those. Teresa, it's spelled Tubi, T-U-B-I, T-U-B-I. Cool. Another question. What does all rights mean in the context of Film Hub's deal? Does it mean the filmmaker returns all rights, or does it mean that Film Hub takes all rights? So with Film Hub, you still essentially have all rights to your film. Film Hub doesn't take that. I believe you have to give Film Hub 30 days notice if you want your film taken off of Film Hub and off of all of the streaming platforms. But that said, at any point you can tell Film Hub that you want to take that film back. So you maintain all rights. There is no long deals with Film Hub. You maintain all of the rights to that film. Cool. So we got a question from Jordan. What if you just want a theatrical release first? How do you do that? Does Film Hub just have trailers that promote theatrical releases? No, Film Hub doesn't deal with theatrical releases. So if you want to do a theatrical release first, you want to, I would do that before Film Hub, before adding your film onto Film Hub. And there's a completely different way to having a theatrical release. In actually about a month, we're going to have a film funding and distribution conference, which is another free event, where one of the talks is going to be with an expert specifically on theatrical distribution. So if you're interested in theatrical self-distribution, check out cinecircle.co.uk and take a look at the event, the Film Funding and Distribution Conference, and one of the talks will be specifically on that. Cool. So we got another question. You're supposed to start marketing before you even shoot the film. If you're just starting marketing after your film is out there, then you're too late. You're kind of behind the ball. Yeah, exactly. So, as I mentioned, there's so many different things that you want to do while you're shooting. You want to already be getting articles and PR and already building an audience, right? Building an email list, engaging with Facebook groups so that, so that when you actually post that link, people will see it. So there's so many different things that you want to do before the film is released. Cool. Got someone saying, forget about Film Hub. If you want a theatrical release, if you're aiming for a theatrical release, Film Hub isn't the right choice. They focus on quantity over quality and don't care about your film. So first of all, yes, they're completely not for theatrical distribution. And also, their job is to pitch your film to some of those streaming platforms, and they will continue to pitch your film if you're making them revenue. But that said, they don't have any loyalty to your film. which essentially means if your film is added onto Film Hub and for whatever reason it doesn't get picked up, if it gets picked up and by one streaming platform and you don't make it a significant revenue, then they're not going to pitch it to other platforms. They 100% are, quite automated, algorithm based, which means that it's also quite hard to reach them if you want one-on-one support. So in that sense, they are 100% focused on quantity over quality. But that doesn't mean that it can't be a great source of revenue for you. Okay, any other questions? Independent animation features, the budget. Animation features have a budget of between 2 million and 5 million. I still don't see how self-distribution would recoup the cost of an animated feature. Now, if you have a film that's in a budget range of 2 to 5 million, and you haven't had some sort of pre-sales, you don't already have relationships with distributors, it's going to be extremely difficult to recoup that money. Also, if you've made a film with 2 to 5 million, self-distribution is not for you. And if you're looking to recoup the money on that investment, it's absolutely not going to be the right platform for you. And you will definitely need to look at selling your film individually to various territories in order to be able to recoup that cost. But really, if you're making a film with that budget, you should have some sort of pre-sales or deals with minimum guarantees with distributors in order to have a chance of recouping that money. Would this strategy work for a social justice or true crime documentary? Yeah, absolutely. I mean, my feeling is that a social justice documentary is something that a lot of people want to watch. And if people see clips of that on TikTok, on organic social, on Facebook groups, if they start seeing clips of your film, which can be a great promotional strategy, is just releasing small clips of the film, that can really, really get people's blood boiling and going, oh man, I want to watch that whole film. So because there is a big emotional effect that your film might have on the audience, even by showing them small clips, if people you got to understand that marketing a film and people deciding to watch your film is an emotional response. It's not going to be logical. Oh, I would like to watch this. It's going to be emotional. Oh, I feel like that could be good. Let me go watch it. Oh my God, I'm really angry. How could this possibly happen? And then, they get to watch the film. So 100%, I think it's a great film for self-distribution. Okay, let me know if you guys have any other questions. Feel free to add them into the chat. I'm going to stick around for another minute or two in case there are any other questions. And once again, for anyone who is interested in the self-distribution mastery taking place next week, 3 days, also in the evenings UK time, sort of morning time Pacific time, same time as this masterclass was, but it tends to be about 2.5 hours each day, Tuesday to Thursday. And again, we are going to be going into a lot more detail on, today was the what you should do. And that mastery program is going to be the how to actually do all of this so that it makes sense. So I do hope to see some of you there. I know a few of you have already got your tickets, so I'm excited to see you guys there. But yeah, in the meantime, we have a variety of other events that we do as well. So check us out on cinecircle.co.uk. Although we're UK based, the majority of our online attendees tend to be from US and Canada. So all of our strategies that we do are always, useful for people around the globe. We've got another question from Melissa. What platforms do you recommend for animated films with smaller budgets to self-distribute? So in terms of the platforms, I think in terms of the distribution platforms, I always recommend Film Hub. By the way, if anyone has an alternative to Film Hub, so someone who's got experience with another distribution platform that does what Film Hub does, please let me know in the chat. I would honestly really love to explore any other options over here, or to give people other options as well. But really, I wouldn't pick and choose your specific streaming platforms. if you've got a a animated film with a smaller budget, I would release it on as many different platforms as you possibly can. So you put it onto Film Hub, and you don't add any restrictions on Film Hub, and you just try and release it on as many platforms as possible. So rather than picking and choosing. Okay. So once again, I'm gonna stick around for another minute or so. Yeah, for any final questions. But yeah, in the meantime, once again, thank you guys all for attending the event today. I hope that you guys found it useful, and I hope to see you guys at a future City Circle event. Yeah, Bitmax is an alternative, but again, it is yeah, it's you pay up front rather than getting a individual fee. But yeah, but that's yeah, I heard that Bitmax is you pay up front, but you sort of get what you pay for there as well. Fantastic, guys. Once again, thank you so much. I hope that you guys have a lovely rest of your evening if you're in the UK, or rest of your day if you're based in the US or Canada or somewhere else. And once again, I hope that you yeah, come to one of our future events. So I hope you found it useful, and take care. I see a couple of questions that have come in, so I'll quickly answer those as well. Jordan, is the Film Funding and Distribution Conference. So if you check out cinecircle.co.uk, I'll just add it into the chat. Yeah, it is the Film Funding and Distribution Conference. It's a free event taking place in April. We got another question from Ronald regarding the Black female-driven films doing well on Tubi. Do you think we can try to create and make other genres become successful? So I don't think it's the filmmakers making genres successful. I think it's the audience demand that creates that. So you have to figure out what films are people saying that they really want to watch, but that there aren't any of those films. Are there documentaries on certain topics? Are there certain genres with certain budget ranges that are currently an underserved market? So you have to just figure out, rather than creating something and hoping the audience loves it, instead what I'd recommend is looking at what the audience is already looking for right now. That's the best way to find a film that's going to be easier to market than others. Okay, guys, once again, thank you so much. Take care, and I hope to see you guys at our future events. Thank you all so much for coming.